Hello and welcome to the very first video of the Penetration Testing Bootcamp. So let's get started with the essential information security terminology. So I have around 30 to 40 different kind of pages we need to go through today, and all these is going to cover the essential stuff that I figured this is going to be something that I would have liked to know when I started information security. So let's get started right away. So why is it important to learn terminologies? Now I'm going to tell you why. Because when you're in the industry and you're going to talk to other people, it's very important that you do actually know how to phrase something. Because if you're going to explain every time what a server is, or what a pen test is, or what a virus is, every time you have to go back and explain it in layman terms, the sentences will get extremely big, and honestly it will be really difficult to have a real conversation about the topic. So it's just very important that you know different kind of phrases and you know your way around. Of course there are more terminologies than these that I've just picked that I'm going to talk about. I had to choose to create a video that would last like 4 hours, or create a video that would last maybe 20 minutes, max a half an hour, which is my kind of go-to stop. And I picked the last one. In the end I have some links and stuff you can look at. You know, they're going to point to other places that can take you even further. So after this you can study yourself or self-study even further to learn even more and interesting terminologies. So let's talk about the important basic terminologies there are. First of all, we need to understand what real cloud is, because we live in a world where cloud is just all over us. Apart from the clouds up in the air, we're talking about IT systems. Now, cloud is a word that got introduced a good deal years ago. Before that, everything was just online. So basically, cloud means an online service. If you translate cloud to something that could be, interpreted directly, layman terms wise, I would say online service. And now it's important that we need to understand the different kind of things cloud can do for us. Apart from this is something you can call always online, there are 3 different main groups of things cloud services can offer us, which is EAs, PAs, and SAs. The first one, EAs, is the one called infrastructure. The infrastructure is something you can pretty much hire. You can lend it. We can call you lend it for money. So you pay something like say $100, and you can get somewhat big infrastructure going on with like different kind of servers communicating. You can configure them, and sometimes you also want some a really good platform. You want to pick your platform wisely, because do you want Windows? Do you want Linux? No, it's up to you. That's also possible. And the last one is called software. Now, software as a service is where you go more down into the actual picking and say, I want to use this software. I want to have my server, my Apache server, my Internet Information Server. I want to have this containerization stuff, this Docker environment online. So you can rent yourself to have a fully fledged, online infrastructure on the right platform with the amount of software you would like. If you read about it more on Amazon, for the Amazon AWS, you can go ahead and read more about it on the Microsoft Azure stuff. Also, there's something called DigitalOcean and so on. So many different kind of platforms to choose from. One of the biggest advantages to this cloud environment is that it's scalable. It's scalable on both the horizontal but also on the vertical level. Now, the horizontal could be explained as that you want more servers. So maybe you need 1 server, then one day you need to extend that to 2 servers because you got more traffic. It's quite easy just to do that in cloud, because it's just some clicks and then some, sliding the credit card, and then that's it, right? So you can also scale it vertically, which would basically mean that you will upgrade the server. It would be bigger, more RAM, more hard disk, and so on. So in short, a cloud is a big network computer ready to serve, and doing a pen test or penetration test on a cloud is not that difficult or different from a normal network. You just could meet a different kind of varieties of defensive mechanisms that you might not see in industry, because this is after all created by big companies that need to, be online always. Software is another word. Now, I guess you already know this, but software is what makes all things in computer. Without software, without programming language, nothing would be in a computer. It would just be an empty plastic box with some metal components not doing anything. So the software makes up the computer, makes up the programs, makes up everything, the communication, the way it works, everything. So in a pen test, security-wise thing, software is what you kind of want to break. So if you can break the software or misuse it in some way that was unintentional, well, this is what really we should understand by this. Domain is another thing. It can either be something you example.com as a web domain that is put on a web domain provider's servers, or it can also be something you log on. So you log on to a domain, as a work group, and then you get access to different kind of things, which is in the office. It could be printers, shared folders, and other computers, and so on. The virtual private network, or the VPN, could also be sometimes referred to as, commonly people probably call it, do you have are you anonymous on the internet? Do you want anonymity? And it could be used. You use a VPN, like something like ExpressVPN, or what's it called, NordVPN or something like that, NordVPN. And it's a really good idea to do it, because you can hide yourself. You can basically be anonymous on the internet. Of course, the idea is that the log files on the servers that you hire the service through, the VPN servers, the ones that own them, they probably is activated, so they still know what your IP is. So if they are hacked, you probably don't get anything fine. So that's really just important to understand. The VPN is just an extra, joint of communication you need to go through before you get out on the part of the internet you want to visit, right? And using a VPN or being a part of that, will of course have a negative effect on your bandwidth speed, so it will go slower. An IP address is another great important term to understand, because we have it all over the place. IP address is put on a computer. Even your smartphone have an IP address, because you are connected in some way. An IP address could be the equivalent of a house address. So you can of course be on different IP addresses with your device, and depending on which kind of way you connect to the internet with your device can get different IP addresses over time. Now, there are two different kinds you need to be aware of right now. The one is called the dynamic type, and the one is called the permanent type, right? Let's call it that. The dynamic type of IP address is something you get, for example, when you go to work and you log on, and then you get some sort of IP address. And the chances that you get the same that you had before, because there's some sort of leech to it, so it can live for let's say 14 days, and then you will get a renewed IP address. Depending on that, some servers handling that. I'm not going to get into details what it's called and so. I'm just telling you that there are dynamic IP addresses that is given to you when you connect. Now, the permanent IP address is something you buy. So you say you buy a permanent IP address, and you're gonna give, let's say $50 a month for having that. Then you always have the same IP address. That is needed for servers that are big. For example, let's assume you use Skype a lot. And Skype, all the clients connecting to each other, they all need to know the one place they need to connect to. So you probably have one, let's assume one is enough, but one big server, and that server you will connect to and say, I want to be a part of this group or this chat group so I can talk together with other people. So IP addresses is really important. And so when you're gonna conduct a penetration test, you always start pinging an IP address, which is a server, saying, hey, are you there? And it's gonna say, yeah, I'm here, or it's not gonna respond at all. Who knows? An exploit is another very important term you need to understand. An exploit is what you could commonly also call a vulnerability. And the exploit doesn't really imply that it works before you tested it. if I should be totally strict about it. A vulnerability is something that works, and vulnerabilities is something you don't want, and exploits are created to try and exploit that vulnerability and see if it can be used to something, that could take over the server or network. That is the general idea behind exploits. A breach is something that you might also hear, is that when you got hacked, there's a breach in some way, and that could be either mild or even severe, depending on what kind of breach it is. Now I'm gonna back to a bit more serious breaches, so I'm just gonna skip. A firewall is a defensive type of software you can install on a computer. But you can also buy a hardware firewall. The hardware firewall is commonly quite expensive, and it also got a lot of RAM, system memory and stuff like that, to have a bigger threshold to some sort of attacks that's gonna put the strain on the firewall. Hardware firewalls also is a lot more resilient, and they can withstand bigger attacks, where software firewalls is something you probably have installed in your Windows Server, Windows Defender. It's gonna just take off the smaller attacks and say, oh, we have something going on there, maybe we should look at it. Malware is the common term for malicious software. Now, software that is intentionally bad for a computer, as the text says. It could be many different kind of things. We're going to get back to that in a few moments. The first one is called a virus. Now, a virus is probably something you heard of. If you are of age, let's say 40 plus, you probably heard about some viruses in the early days in computers that would do something or delete something, or leak some information. That is what viruses in general do. They don't really have some sort of specific purpose. Can be many different kind of things. Typically, a virus is introduced because someone did something they shouldn't do, and typically it's because of human error, as I wrote. Basically, because humans are the biggest threat to the IT industry, because humans make the exploit the software, and humans make flaws. That is a thing we need to be aware of. Ransomware, one of the more destructive pieces of malware there are. It infects the whole network and whatever it can access to, and encrypt all your data. And you're gonna pay the hackers in bitcoins in order to get your data back. Even so, there is no guarantee that the key you get actually will work, because most ransom software is just created really bad, and this is just the irony of it all. Never pay, always try to delete and use your backup. A Trojan Horse is another very popular piece of malware. It allows hackers to reconnect back to your computer system some way, also as it is known as a wooden horse. You're gonna drive in your castle, and then the offenders, whatever you want to call it, inside the wooden horse will jump out and just attack. Also, you can call it a backdoor in. A worm is a very interesting piece of software, and its speciality is to replicate itself. Now, what that replication should do and how it works doesn't really matter for now, but whenever you have replicated software, it could be a door connecting or asking for a connection to some portal, some hacker server or something, a person that could upload some more bad malware, software, whatever, to the victim's machine, and thus creating even stuff like data theft, destruction, or any other action. So, which is why it brings us to the idea of botnets, because when you are infected in some way, it would be really a good idea if your botnet could be used. Of course, it's a bad thing. But a botnet is a collection of zombie PCs or bots, you're going to call it, infected computers. Now, usually that could be from a worm, and then that worm could become a piece of software that could be given instructions from a command control server, which is controlled by the hackers, and then that command control server will tell the machine what to do, when to do it, and when to be active and not. Which is why, a big horde of computers could be a part of a botnet, and usually they are used to perform something like a DOS attack, which is a distributed denial of service attack, like saying denying that service availability or denying that service to be active or running, which is in turn is really destructive, because if a company cannot make money for, let's say, 4 days because they've been DOSed or DOS attacked, then that could mean millions every day they could not, sell for or whatever. It's the businesses, right? Spyware is another very interesting piece of software, and it's also a malware, of course it is, but the main purpose of spyware is to spy on you. Spyware commonly doesn't really try to be found or tries to be found or yell a lot, but it could be recording information, and either it sends information lively to a hacker, to a server, or store it somewhere where a hacker have access to in order to access the data. There are different things like keyloggers, which is a piece of software that will record everything you type on the computer, which is basically really bad. A rootkit is another piece of software that is also very interesting, not to have it installed on your computer, but it's basically used to control the victim's computer, and that's bad. So if you have access to a computer and you can install a rootkit on that computer, basically you can control the computer. A DDoS is a distributed denial of service attack, and it is kind of the same as a DOS attack. However, the distributed one will aim to put down services a bit more direct, as the name is distributed. The DOS and the DDoS is kind of the same. The general idea is that they remove the availability of the service, which is why they're both kind of destructive, and it's actually some of the things that is very difficult to hinder or to mitigate yourself away from, because you cannot really stop the traffic. Phishing or spear phishing, it is kind of also the same, but phishing is more like you just send lots of emails and hope to get something, and spear phishing is where you say this amount of people or that person going to try to directly trick those. So it's a different kind of way. Spear phishing is more directed, where phishing is more like spamming or whatever you got. You probably got some spam emails with something about something at some point. That is probably just a phishing attack. Encryption is another very important term to understand, because encryption is also known as something that can be decrypted. So if you have something like this logger here, and you then log it and then you unlock it. Now you could say that you encrypt it and decrypt when you open it and log it, and log it, because then you get access to whatever it protects, right? That is one analogy you can use. The other one I would say is you want to hide some information in a way so not everyone can get access to it. Even though they got access to it, the data is encrypted, so you cannot see it. It's just jumble jumble, doesn't make sense. Only have the key, you can decrypt it, or the secret, then you can see the text in clear text. Also something called hashing, which is another form of encryption. It's a one-way encryption. You cannot decrypt that at all. It's not possible. You need to brute force a hashed piece of data in order to know what the data is. Brute forcing basically just means that you will try and take a piece of data, and then you hash it and then compare if the hash is the same. So it's going to take a long time, basically. Pentesting is what this course is all about. It's the act of actual hacking. It is what you do. You want to try and evaluate the security of the network in some way. This is what penetration testing is all about. It is an offensive act. It is something you do to... you're not trying to hide yourself, let me say it that way. You are directly offensive and very active, and you are banging on the doors, and you really want to try and find something. Of course, the eventual thing that should happen in a penetration test is the actual penetration, which basically means that you get access to the computer, whatever you want to try, you break it, or, well, what is the purpose? But that is the general idea behind pen testing. Social engineering is the act of manipulation and deception, which is In other words, someone or more people trying to cheat or trick other people, lure them into do something for them, making them believe that they are someone they are not, or something like that in the same area. It's very widely seen in the industry because it's easier than you probably guessed that you can cheat people. That's very easy to do actually if you just know a few things. Try and enter some foreign office you haven't been to before. See how far you can get by just saying, "But I am the engineer. I need to have a call, as a tech engineer." So that's gonna be kind of scary how easy it is sometimes. Clickjacking is another very important thing to know, and it is the act of making a user on some sort of graphical user interface, commonly known as also a web page, to click on something that was not meant to be clicked on. And that could be some link or button or something that was placed there by a hacker. They can not just place it, it requires some other vulnerability in order to make clickjacking work. But if you can make people click something, they can be directed to other web pages where they can be attacked even more and so on, thus becoming the target, and then an actual vulnerability could be used if there is one on the computer. The types of hackers is white hat, black hat, and gray hat. Now there are subcategories to all of those. I'm not really going to mention that because I don't really feel it's important. What is important is to know is that if you are hired, you are the white hat, you're the white guys, not well. If you are the white hats, or you are hired by industry, or you want to do it for the good. Now, if you're the black hat or the black guys, what they call them, you are the bad guys. Now, I want to say this really specifically: the white and the black thing is what it's called, right? It's not something that I make up. It's just what it's called, okay? So the gray hats is the gray guys, and they are the guys in the middle, and they kind of react to the world as they see fit. So cannot really direct them, right? So this is the types of hackers there are, and basically I hope you are white hats doing it for the good purpose. Yes. And the payload is another very interesting, commonly known as the actual bad part of software. So whenever you have some sort of vulnerability or an exploit in progress or working already, that piece of software, which is called an exploit, is shipped with a payload, like a rocket, for example. The ship part is the the recovery system and maybe the motor and stuff like that. And then from there, everything in between is probably some sort of payload that's going to do the actual vulnerability, to exploit the actual exploit on the vulnerability and see if you can get through in a pen test and then actually get the victim hacked. That is the general idea. Now, it's very important to know that this is very advanced. To go into the idea of what is actually payload, how does it look, it's going to be way beyond this course. So we will use payloads at some point, but that's going to be script-based ones, like written in Python or something like that. And of course, I'm going to explain it, and I really hope that you're going to get this far, this course, because it's going to be a long course, going to be a good course, and I really, really hope to see you watching all the videos. A threat is something that is kind of easy, I guess, to understand. It is the same in the computer. A threat is also commonly known as something that is inside or outside the company that can harm you, your company, basically. Now, you need to have some sort of risk assessment in order to understand your threats, and when you can understand your threats, you can implement countermeasures in order to mitigate yourself away from them as much as possible. Assets are very important to understand. It could mean different things like data, your computer, or even humans you hired. Assets are so important because without assets, you don't have anything to protect. And if you don't have anything to protect, you do not need IT security, thus implying that you don't have a company probably. So I would like to say that assets is something you need to identify. What is your assets? How many are there? What are they? How do you protect them? And you do that by creating risk assessments. There's a small picture as you see here, but risk assessment come in many shapes and forms, and I really suggest you go ahead and just search risk assessment, and you will find different ways to do it. It's straightforward and nothing crazy about it, but it is for trying to calculate the general idea of where to put the effort in protecting your own company, which assets is more important to try and protect first, and so on, or we should be prioritized, and all these kind of things is what the risk assessment is for. A zero-day is a type of exploit that is not known to the general vendors yet. They are commonly known by the black hats, probably also by the gray hats, but not the white hats. The white hats, they need to basically be a part of the community in order to know them. If you find a zero-day exploit in some way, you know, they can usually be sold for a lot of money in the underground hacking community. And of course that is not a good idea, because then you are a black hat. But you know, I would suggest if you ever find something no one else knows, for example the one many people talked about, like the Log4j, which was a zero-day for how long? You know, some exploit is out there still known by the hackers and the dark web and all the kind of, you know, underground industry, but it's not really known by the vendors yet. When the vendors know it, they will find a solution for it, and it is not a zero-day anymore. If you want to read more and further resources, I really suggest you go ahead to visit this link here. I'm going to put it in the description below so you can click it. Like all links that I find, I will put it in the description below. So that's for this video. We keep it to 30 minutes, maximum 26 minutes, 22 seconds. The first video about essential security, information security terminologies. And of course there are more different kind of important terminologies you need to know. Just click the link and knock yourself out. Apart from that, if you work in a company already have a job, try to use these terminologies regularly, because when you do that, you will get into conversation with others and you will learn more and learn stuff, which is the way to go. So I want to say have a really good one, and see you again online.